Hi, my name is Charlie Lott, and today I'm going to show you how to create a proportional symbol map using Excel, ArcGIS Pro, and the Adobe Creative Cloud. A proportional symbol map or bubble map looks like this: a symbol for each point of data, in this case a circle, with a smaller or larger size depending on its data value. This map is showing tuition costs at public universities in the US from 2002 through 2023. The first thing we're going to need for our map is some data. I'm from Maryland, so I'm going to work with data that's local to me. I downloaded this spreadsheet of each Maryland county's monthly unemployment rates from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It was published by the Division of Workforce Development and Adult Learning, and it covers the years 2005 through 2025. There's a download link for this data in the video description. It's important to think about the quantity of data you have to work with. We're creating a data-driven animation, so the more data points you have, the more interesting and robust your visualization will be. I generally recommend at least 20 points of data for a project to be worth animating. In this case, I have a data point for each month starting in 2005, which is 242 points of data, which should be plenty. This is how you want your spreadsheet to be set up in Excel. You want a separate column for each temporal data point. In my case, a separate column for each month. You also want a separate row for each location on your map. Make sure that each row has a unique ID in the first column. This can be a numeric ID or a unique name like the name of the county. One other thing to remember, you don't want any blank header columns, so make sure to put a value in this blank cell in the top left corner. Save a copy of this Excel spreadsheet as a .csv file. Now let's open up ArcGIS Pro. I'm going to move pretty quickly through this part of the tutorial because we're more focused on the animation side of things, and most GIS pros should already be pretty familiar with these steps. First, I'll change the map projection to something more local to Maryland. Then I'll add in the living atlas layer for US counties. I'll copy the counties for Maryland to a new layer. Remove the fill, remove the transparency, and set the border to solid black. Now I need a point at the center of each county. So I'll run the geoprocessing tool feature to point, remove the stroke from these points, and set their fill color to solid black, and I should be good to go. Now I need to create a layout sized for HD video, which is 1920 by 1080 pixels, and frame up the state of Maryland. I'll also remove the border around the layout and remove any service layer credits. I also want to make sure that my county points are a little bit larger, just to make them easier to work with. The exact size doesn't really matter because we're going to be resizing them later on in After Effects. This is looking great. We need to export this in a way that we can access the individual points in Adobe Illustrator. Esri has partnered with Adobe to create a handy plugin called ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud. This plugin allows you to export .aix files out of ArcGIS Pro and then open and work with them in Adobe Illustrator. The download link for the plugin is also in the video description. I'll go to export the layout, select a high DPI value like 300, and export it as a .aix file. Now open up Adobe Illustrator, click on the Window dropdown, select the ArcGIS Maps plugin, and log in using your ArcGIS account. Now click File, Open, and navigate to the .aix file we exported out of Pro. You'll see that our layer stack on the right side of the screen is a little wonky. The first thing I'm going to do here is move the county outlines and points out of their content hierarchy and delete all the blank paths and layers and whatnot. I'll click on the eyeball icon next to my county points so that only the county borders are showing, and then save this version of the file. Now delete those county borders and resave the Illustrator file with a different name. We want each county point to be on its own layer to make it easier to animate them individually. So select the parent layer containing all the county points, click on the hamburger icon above your layer stack and select Release to Layers Sequence. Now all of the points are on their own layers, so you can save this file one more time and exit out of Illustrator. Now let's get our layers set up in After Effects. Create a new composition sized for HD video, 1920 by 1080 pixels again, with a frame rate of 25 frames per second. The frame rate number is important here because we're going to be doing some math later based on the frame rate of the composition. I'll set the composition length to 4 minutes to give us plenty of time to work with. Now click on File, Import, and navigate to the Illustrator file that contains the county outlines. In this drop-down menu, you can import the file as footage. Let's also add a white solid to the composition so that our black foreground elements will be easier to see. Now import the county points. This time, in the drop-down menu, select the option to import the file as composition instead of as footage. Double-click into the composition that you just imported, Shift select all of the layers, copy them, and then paste them back into our main composition. You can delete the original county points composition that we created. Shift select all the county point layers, right click and select Create Shapes from Vector Layer. Now we've turned all of the Illustrator layers into vector shapes, so we can seamlessly change their sizes, colors, outlines, and other attributes. You can click on the color swatch on one of the original Illustrator layers, select Label Group, and then delete them from your composition. Now we need to do a little bit of layer maintenance. The first thing we want to do is select all of our county point layers. You can see this little crosshair in the middle of the composition. This is showing that the anchor point for all these shapes is the middle of the screen. That means that when we scale them up and down, they're going to move out of their respective county borders. To fix this issue, make sure all the points are selected and hit Ctrl-Alt-Home on your keyboard. This will snap the anchor points to the center of each respective county. Next, we need to make sure that we can tell the difference between these counties in the layer stack. Let's take the time to rename them by selecting each layer, hitting enter, and typing in a new name. I'm going to keep a map of Maryland with the county names up on screen to make sure that I'm labeling them correctly. I'll also keep my Excel data spreadsheet up on screen because it's important to have these county point layers in the same order as they are on my data spreadsheet. Now that we have all our county point layers in the correct order, renamed, and with their anchor points centered, we can start making them move. I'm going to go through two ways of accomplishing this. The first is a no-code solution. It's a little bit more repetitive because you need to do several steps in sequence for each individual county point. But if you're not comfortable working in JavaScript, then this is the method for you. Right-click on the first county point layer and select Effect, Expression Controls, and then Slider Control. Navigate through the drop-down menus underneath the layer to find your new slider control effect. Move your playhead to the very beginning of the timeline. Now, click on the little stopwatch icon next to your slider control effect. This will allow you to set keyframes along your timeline. In animation, a keyframe is a new value of a parameter. Each time you set a new keyframe and change its value, it'll animate between the value of the original keyframe and the value of the new keyframe. We need a keyframe each time we want the data value to change. I want my data values to change each 5 frames. So I'll make sure there is a keyframe at 0, at 5, at 10, at 15, and at 20. In order to move more easily along the timeline, you can use the page up and page down keys to move a single frame forward or backward. You only need to set up these keyframes for one of your layers. Once you have your keyframe set up, select the slider control effect and click Ctrl-C to copy it to your keyboard. Open up a blank Excel spreadsheet, click into the very first cell, and click Ctrl-V to paste. Now you can see exactly how those keyframes you created are stored in After Effects. You'll notice that we have a new value every 5 frames of animation, but that all of the values are 0. What we need to do is copy our raw data values and paste them into this new format. I have 242 data values, so just to make sure that there's room for them, I'm going to click and drag the cell at the bottom of the spreadsheet just over here to the side. Make sure to remember how things looked before you started making these kinds of changes, because we're going to need to set up this spreadsheet in exactly the same way. I'll navigate to my data spreadsheet, select all of the data points for our first location, which is Allegheny County, and hit Ctrl-C on my keyboard to copy them. Now, move back to the spreadsheet with your After Effects keyframe data and right-click on the first 0 data value. Under Paste, click on Transpose, which will transpose the horizontal data that we copied into a vertical format. Now we need the same number of frame values as we have data values, so select all of the frame values and click and drag the little dot in the lower right-hand corner all the way to the bottom of the sheet. This will continue the same pattern of 1 keyframe every 5 frames. Now we just need to move the text that we put over here to the side back to the bottom of the spreadsheet. Copy the entire thing using Ctrl-C, move back into Adobe After Effects, make sure that your playhead is at the very beginning of the timeline, click on the slider control effect, and click Ctrl-V to paste. You'll see all of your keyframes populate the timeline, and if you scroll through, you can see that the data value is updating accordingly. Now navigate through the drop-down menus underneath the Allegheny County layer to find the scale property. We don't want the scale property that lives under Transform. We want the one under the Contents and Group 1. Click and drag the little curly Q next to the scale value and drag it on top of your slider control effect. This is called the pick whip, and it allows you to tie one value to another so that they move in sync. You can now see that the dot for Allegheny County is animating, but since they're based on percentage points of unemployment, it's way too small. Let's create a control layer by clicking on Layer, New, and Null Object. We'll rename this layer Control by clicking on it, hitting Enter on the keyboard, and typing out a new name. Add a slider control effect to this object by right-clicking on it and selecting Effect, Expression Control, and Slider Control. Up here in the Effect panel, let's rename this slider control to Scale_Parameter and give it a value of 100. Click on the little padlock just above it to lock it in place. Okay, navigate through the drop-down menus underneath the Allegheny County layer to find the expression that is driving its scale. I won't spend too much time explaining how these expressions work, but all you need to do is click into this expression window, move your cursor to the end of what is currently written just before the semicolon, and then add an asterisk. Now, with your cursor still at the end of what is written in this expression window between the asterisk and the semicolon, click and drag on the lower of the two curly cues, or pick whips, and drop it onto the Scale Parameter slider control in our Effect Controls window. We're now multiplying the raw data value that we brought in by 100 each frame, so that our dots are scaling more noticeably. If you click over to the beginning of your timeline and press spacebar to play, you should be able to see the dot for Allegheny County animating larger and smaller over time. From here, you just need to repeat those steps for each of the counties. First, add a slider control effect to the Anne Arundel County layer. Now open up your unemployment data spreadsheet and your keyframe data spreadsheet. Copy the raw data values for Anne Arundel County, transpose them into the data values next to the keyframes, copy the contents of the keyframe spreadsheet, and paste it back onto the slider control, making sure that your playhead is at the beginning of the timeline. Pick whip the correct scale parameter to the slider control effect, click into the expression for scale, add an asterisk, and pick whip back to the scale parameter constant. Now you have two dots animating. This can be a bit of a tedious process. It shouldn't take too long with only 24 counties, but it would take forever if you had a lot more points. But there's a faster way. It just requires a little bit more knowledge of JavaScript. I'm going to delete the slider control effects from each of my county layers. I'll also hold Alt and click on the stopwatch next to the scale values we changed to delete the expressions that are currently on them. I'll leave the scale parameter locked in our effect controls at the top because we're going to need it later. Click and drag your .csv data file into the pane on the left of your After Effects project, called the project pane. This needs to be in .csv format, not Excel format. Now, go back to the scale property for Allegheny County, hold Alt, and click on the stopwatch again to add an expression to the scale of the point. We need two values for scale because you can scale horizontally and vertically, so we'll type out a bracket with two values, 100, 100. We'll always keep these values the same as each other because we want our circles to scale uniformly, not turn into ovals. Above our scale values, let's declare a variable called data_value. Add an equal sign next to it and then pick whip up to the data.csv file in your project pane. At the end of this variable, type out .dataValue and then add parentheses. Inside of the parentheses, add brackets and two values, 1, 1. Change our scale values, the 100s that we put in earlier, to the data value variable. You can open up your .csv file and see which cell our expression is pointing to. In these JavaScript expressions, the first column is value 0, the second is value 1, and so on. It ignores the topmost row, assuming that those are labels, and then the second row is value 0, the third is value 1, and so on. Our 1, 1 x and y values are pointing to the second column, or column 1, and the third row, or row 1. This is the first data value for Allegheny County. We want to move one column value, or 1 month, every 5 frames. So let's create a new variable called column and set it equal to the expression math.floor time times 5 plus 1. This will increase the column value by 1 every 5 frames. We'll also multiply our data value variable by the scale parameter to make it easier to see what's happening in the viewport. An error message is showing up in our composition, but we can ignore that for now. We'll fix it later. The important thing is the scale of our Allegheny County point is changing. We can now copy and paste the expression for scale onto the other layers in our composition. But before we do that, we need to teach our expression how to look at the correct row of data for each county. We can't have them all looking at Allegheny County. First, we need to add a numeric row value to each layer's name. If they're in the same order as they appear in the CSV file, then this is easy. Just add -1 to Allegheny County, -2 to Anne Arundel County, and so on for all of the layers. Now, open the expression back up for Allegheny County. In our data value variable, where we have hard-coded the number 1, let's change it out for something new. First, let's declare a new variable, row, and set it equal to this layer .name.split, then in parentheses and in quotations, our hyphen character, then closed parentheses and the number 1 in brackets. The number 1 here is telling it to pick the second string in the name of the layer separated by hyphens. The 0 string would be Allegheny County, and the number 1 string would be the number 1. For Anne Arundel County, the 0 string will be Anne Arundel County, and the 1 string will be the number 2. Now let's change out the number 1 in our data value expression for the row variable. Now when we copy and paste this expression into the scale value for the other layers, they won't all look at the same row of data, but will look at the correct row for their respective counties. After we copy and paste our scale expression onto our other layers, we can press play and see that all of our county dots are animating. But there's one issue. Even though the scale is animating, it's not doing it smoothly because the data value is only changing once every 5 frames. That's kind of a complicated problem to solve, but it can also be solved using a JavaScript expression. That expression looks like this. For this tutorial, I've included the expression in the video description. You just need to change the name of your .csv file and the name of your null layer, and it should sync right up. If you have any questions about how this expression works, just let me know in the comments and I can point you in the right direction to learn more. Now that we have our points scaling up and down properly, we just need to make our map a bit nicer looking by adding colors, titles, legends, and all that good stuff. I'm fast forwarding through this part because it's a little bit beyond the scope of this tutorial, but if you're interested in more how-tos on using Adobe After Effects to animate GIS data, stay tuned because I have several more planned for the near future. If there's anything in particular you want to learn how to create, just let me know and I'll try to add it to the docket. In the meantime, enjoy this brief time lapse. And voila! Here's our finished animated map of unemployment rates in Maryland counties over the last 20 years. You can see that animating this data has unearthed some interesting trends, like a sharp increase in unemployment during the 2008 financial crisis. Also, if you look down here in Worcester County, you can see that unemployment fluctuates more than anywhere else, which is because it's so dependent on seasonal workers when people want to go to the beach during the summer. Animation is a very effective cartographic tool for making visually stunning maps, but also for calling attention to phenomena that might otherwise go unnoticed. Anyways, that's all I have for today. Thanks for checking out this video tutorial and stay tuned for more in the future. Peace.